Hey, what's going on, y'all? My name is Bryson Powers, Momentum Champion and one of the co owners of the Ascend Group at Momentum Realty. I got the chance to sit down with one of our fearless leaders, Jon Brooks, to talk a little bit about this market. You see, we have an insanely low supply of homes and an incredible amount of demand looking to buy into Northeast Florida, whether they live here or they're coming from the Northeast, the West. We talk a little bit about the shortages we're facing, the shortcomings we're facing, how to be successful in this market, both for your business and your clients. Let's get into the video. We have a lot in store for today. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about the market, what Momentum is doing in order to fuel this market and how we're finding success, what we stand for, and then talk a little bit about our up and coming brokerage, Ascend Realty. So pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think the people all want to know what the heck is going on right now. We continue to see sky high prices. We continue to see record low inventory, and nobody knows when this is going to end, especially when you throw into the mix that we finally are starting to see the Fed taper off on their involvement in the mortgage-backed securities market, which has been seeing a rise in interest rates. So if housing affordability was ever an issue, it is certainly now. It already was.
Yeah, I mean, this market is absolutely one of a kind. This is the most unique circumstances we've ever had. We have an extreme supply shortage that we've never experienced before, on top of the highest level of demand from relocations that we've seen. And these people who are relocating here are generally wealthier. They've already made their money and they're purchasing properties cash, and then they're competing with cash investors. Jacksonville's a hot spot for large institutional investors gobbling up single family properties. So there's shortages, and we refer to this as the 3 L's: labor, land, and logistics. Those are the 3 areas that are creating these supply constraints. And we think that they're going to continue, and it'll actually get a lot worse if you're looking to buy a home in the future than it is now. And that's because interest rates will move up. There's fears of inflation. Affordability will become a larger factor, and supply constraints are still there on top of all of those other factors. So it's just going to become more expensive for buyers to buy into this market. And we don't see any end in sight because the logistics for these builders are so behind. I mean, they're missing deadlines. They're missing close dates by 4, 6, 8 months, waiting for windows, waiting for little things like garage door openers and things that the customer is purchasing. They're just not getting the supplies to finish these houses. And, put the war with Ukraine on top of that, and the global geopolitical tensions and shipping and freight and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden we see the global supply chain kind of be disrupted at the same time, just coming off of COVID. So we're in just a super unique, one of a kind market. If you're a seller, you're getting the most equity for your home probably ever in the shortest period of time. And if you're a buyer, chances are that you'll pay a higher price tomorrow just because of what we're observing in the market.
Yeah, and all of those factors. I mean, talk about a complete intersection of just so many factors going into it. Not only do we have, we're still reeling from the effects of COVID and people taking time off work and breaking the supply chain in essence, but we're starting to see, we're not importing any Russian goods and vice versa. And we're going to start seeing supply chain shortages on that front with the geopolitical climate. We also see, I'm trying to think of who posted it, but I saw the rising window costs, like stuff you don't think about, where all of a sudden windows are like now the most expensive thing to install. They already are not a fun cost to bear. So when you're looking at building something right now, it's hard to taper down a price because it's taking longer because we're waiting on stuff. We're also waiting on labor to hit the market. We're seeing a lack of physical labor right now. And in doing so, there's so much volatility that happens during that window. So it's always hard to budget for a house right now, because by the time you get to a certain portion of the construction of the home, it may have doubled It seriously may have doubled by the time you get to buying windows or, putting in carpet or something like that.
So what are your predictions for 2022, Bryson?
Um, I think we continue to see this crazy low inventory. I think we're going to start seeing buyers, back off the market. I know I have personally already seen that, where just affordability, the people were already on the fence this past year, right? And I'm out in the field. I know the hesitations, and the people that have persevered and said, you know what, Bryson, we want to do whatever it takes to get into the market. They got into the house and they are profiting from it. The people that pump the brakes on their home search, well, they're stuck in a rental. The rent, they either now face two options if they are coming to the end of their lease, where they either have to renew, and rental prices are just the same right now with the amount of demand for rentals, that they either have to renew for hundreds of dollars more a month, or they have to finally get into the market and things are twice as expensive. I mean, in 6 months, for instance, I've had two clients that have reached out to me to sell their home. One actually just sold their home. We bought it in July. She relocated for a better job opportunity. 525 is what we bought it at. We ended up selling it for 637. That is 7 months later. That is unreal. $112,000, where the people that were on the fence and decided to pump the brakes, you missed out on that opportunity. And unfortunately, I see that still being the case. There is no end in sight for the supply issues. And as much as it sucks, just biting down and bearing that cost, I think you're going to look like a genius in a year. And I said this last year, I said it the year before, and it's time in the market versus time in the market.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that supply is going to continue to get worse than it is right now. There's other markets that are similar to Jacksonville when we look at them: Raleigh, North Carolina, Austin, Texas, where they have 0.4 month supply of inventory. Jacksonville still has 1.4 month supply. So we should all be celebrating that we even have the number of homes on the market that we currently have. There's some markets that they've got 8 active listings and they're just waiting for one to pop up, and you've got 50 buyers in that price point that want to buy it. So the multiple of buyers to sellers in the ratio there is insane. And you have a lot of sellers that don't want to put their home on the market because they're afraid of, where am I going to go next? So they end up just staying put and remodeling, and that becomes another issue. Also, all these properties that were bought in 2014, 2015 by these large institutional investors, generally you would see them rotate back around in 7 or 8 years and be put on the market. Those properties are not coming back to the market. They might never come back to the market. So this is permanent supply shortage that we're having in this situation. And so our expectations is that prices will continue to go up until supply catches up, but there's no end in sight for when supply will catch demand, even with the affordability issue pushing a lot of buyers out of the marketplace. So my prediction is that prices will continue to go up. I think, with the Fed, if the Fed decides to raise the rates in the way that they've said so far, I don't think that's going to be enough to slow this market down or see any sort of significant price, if like even being flat. I mean, I just can see prices continue to just shoot straight up in this situation. It's just really tough until we start seeing supply come back on. The only supply that might come back on is the foreclosures, because those are starting to come back to market. There's supposed to be 2 million foreclosures going on in the United States right now, and we're short supply of about 6 million. So that does help, but it's not going to be enough to move the needle and move us out of this extreme seller's market.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is assuming that all 2 million actually hit the market and don't find their way into investors' hands, which, like you said, if it's going to institutional investors, we're still not seeing that supply ever again. So let's say they capture 25% of that 2 million. If it were to hit the market, I mean, we're talking such a marginal fraction of homes. One thing that I thought of a lot, and I've been doing some research on it, is, the only supply I see coming, and there's two, right? We either need to build faster or build more efficient or something like that. I was reading into a lot of articles where I believe this company is located in Tampa, but 3D printing of homes is, I guarantee you, this is the kind of event that is going to exacerbate a need for this, right? Where they're building homes that are basically, foolproof, right? They're built off of a blueprint and they're spun up, using heavy duty industrial machinery in about half the time. So that could be something that maybe it scales, but even then you still have to have the inputs for it in order to hit the supply. And who knows it, we don't have raw materials here in the US, right? We import a lot of our raw materials from elsewhere. And if we're still having geopolitical climate issues, I don't know if we're going to get that supply. The other thing, and the more likely one, is that we're going to start seeing, obviously, we're seeing a huge wave of demand from millennials, right? A lot of millennials are coming onto the market, and we're seeing a ton of buy pressure from that end, from people anywhere from like 24 to 38 that are looking to buy their first home. And, kudos if you got it in the past couple of years. But if you didn't, you're now rushing to see what you can put together in order to make a competitive offer. On the flip side of that, and what I started seeing statistics on, is that we're starting to see baby boomers, as we're getting into that age of life where we're starting to see a lot more of them, pass, then we're starting to see a lot of transfer of wealth. Of that wealth would include property, it would include real estate. So what happens there is really up in the air. That could be some sort of, blip in supply, but even if you factor in all of those together, you get all the foreclosures in the world, you get baby boomer real estate that hits the market because the inheritance, that they don't want to deal with the real estate or something like that, and you have all the 3D printers in the world. I still think even then we are only talking about just barely moving the needle when it comes to this heavy buy demand.
Awesome. So we've outlined what the problem is, what our predictions are. So if you're a buyer in this market, Bryson, what would you recommend to them? Because at the end of the day, if you're listening to this, you're a buyer, you're like, okay, it's really bad and it's going to get worse. I'm renting, my rents are going up $400 a month every single year. I mean, it's getting out of control. I'm barely able to save enough money. What do you tell to that buyer and guide them through this process in this market?
Well, one, I would find somebody who specializes in off-market listings. And you're gonna have to, because as much of a pain as it seems like for buyers, there are also sellers out there. And I promise I've conducted a few of them where you have to go out into the market and you'll find those sellers who are like, Bryson, look, I don't want to go on the market because then it's a feeding frenzy. I don't want a ton of people in my house. I don't want to market my house. I want to find somebody who's willing to take my house while I go ahead and find another house. And you can navigate that situation much better in an off-market situation than putting on the MLS, getting constantly bombarded by interest, and having your head turned, right? Because there are people out there where they know they're going to get so much money for their house. They're looking for terms. And I would say 100% you need to get with a realtor who not only specializes in that, but knows how to craft a creative offer and has the best relationships with the agents out there. I know for a fact that in my recent listing, I told them that this is a great agent to work with, and they barely beat out the other one, but it was the fact that they were a great agent and they made a competitive offer and presented it right. That makes a difference. So on the listing side, that worked. And then from a buyer side, I promise you, I had listings come back to me that, maybe they rejected our initial offer, but they actually came back to me and said, Bryson, you were such a great agent. We thought about it. Things have changed in the situation. We'd like to offer you the house back at that price. No negotiation necessary. And, unfortunately, I've had clients that rejected it or decided to take it. But, it's finding those little niche things that will really move the needle, because look, there's going to be a point where they understand, one, you can't compete with cash. Two, they understand the highest price that people are willing to pay. And you have to find what is marginally going to make your offer that much better and will really make that difference. So, it is biting the bullet. It is understanding that terms are better than price sometimes. It's working with an off-market specialist and knowing that you're gonna just have to bear it right now. And I know it sucks right now. I know it does. But in the future, you will look like a genius. I promise. The people who were doing the same thing last year look like a genius now. The people that are doing the same thing this year will look like a genius in a year.
Yeah. That's so true. So here's some things that I've noticed momentum agents are doing that's making them stand out from the crowd and attracting massive number of buyers to our top performing real estate agents, because we have standards at Momentum of communication and production. And so here's what they're doing. Number one, they're moving away from online leads because they're mostly buyers, and you can get buyers from basically anywhere today because you don't need to pay the big bucks for it. So instead of using their money there, they're door knocking, they're sending out mailers, they're creating content, they're figuring out what their buyers that they want, what they want. They're presenting offers to sellers directly from their buyers at their door. They'll go with an offer to their door. They'll get a list of expired and for sale by owners and go look for the last 2 years, send that list to their buyers, see if there's any houses that interest them, and then go door knock those doors to see if they might be interested in selling now. So they're doing the legwork that all the other agents are not doing. I mean, they're not doing it. They're still just waiting for their phone to ring versus going out there and actually making something happen for their buyers. And this market's going to reward the highly aggressive, highly intense agents that are going to go out of their way to get a good result for their buyer. And so we're super excited to see that. We're already starting to see the results. We have a listing competition, and we have some really happy buyers that probably, if they went with an agent at another company that wasn't doing what we just talked about, they wouldn't be in a home today.
Absolutely. It's something that I've done with my business personally. And again, this is just coming from boots on the ground, right? I've seen the shift, and honestly, I feel like it's a duty now versus just something that needs, would be good for my business. This is a duty. I have a duty to bring homes to these buyers that are desperately clawing for them, which means that I've actually leveraged out most of my buyers to other buyer specialists, so people that I trust with my business that represent exactly what we are all on the same page. We understand 5-star service. We understand communication. My job now is to go out and say, hey, look, one, I already have a pool of buyers, take your pick. Two, I have people that know exactly what they're looking for. Take your pick. I can get you the same result without even having to hit the market if you just work with me. What do you want? Is price important to you? Is terms important to you? And it's leveraging the fact that I do have a big buyer pool, and I work with buyer specialists. And look, sometimes I've actually had somebody who's interested in selling that just said, hey, it may be 3 months from now, but I don't want the same agent representing the buyer and the seller. I said, that's perfect. You want to know what I have? I have buyer specialists. They can work on their side, and I will work for you, right? And we will meet together and we'll come up with a solution that works for everybody. Does that sound fair? And you would be surprised. One, you're talking about, we need supply, and it is not just I'll wait for my phone to ring and hopefully I get some business. No, I have clients who are desperately looking for homes. I have some that have been looking for a year, and it's up to me to take their criteria and do the same thing. And I know so many other momentum agents. I see it every single day in our group. We always have videos and photos of people who are out there, boots on the ground, going door knocking, going to neighborhoods that they know their clients want, and making something happen, right? So it really is a go-getter attitude. I can't stress that enough right now, that because we were treated well these past few years, right? If you want to make it in this market, not just as a buyer, not just as a seller, but as a realtor, you have to make something happen. So it is putting full energy into this.
Yeah, the last 5 years, agents could ride the wave, buy online leads, answer their phone while they're watching Netflix, go close a deal and make a ton of money. And in this year, it's going to take legwork. It's going to take building new habits and trying new strategies that you've never done before to be able to find supply for your buyers. So Bryson, when you were talking about terms, just some examples here, you can, as a buyer, you can offer closing costs, like pay the seller's portion of their closing costs. You can offer them lease back periods with no charge. You purchase it and lease it back to them for 2 to 3 months, for example. You can waive inspections. You can waive repairs and things like that. Whatever it's going to take to, or what, ask the seller, hey, what terms do you want? And we'll see if it's something that we can agree to. So just making sure that your agent is super knowledgeable has rapport and is known as somebody who's trustworthy in the agent community to get the job done. I mean, half the time the agents usually want to work with other agents that they know, like, and trust, and have great service and great communication. So it's more important for buyers and sellers to interview their real estate agent now more than ever, because it's going to mean the difference between you getting your, renewing your lease for another 12 months, or having to find another place to stay if you're relocating here until a property comes up. And it can mean it's just such a huge difference. So like, ultimately you're looking for the most talented, highest producing, agents that have capacity to take you on as a customer. And that means interviewing and asking the questions. Don't just go with the first agent you run into.
I cannot tell you how much that is important. I know plenty of people who say I went with a friend or family member. And of course, when it comes to my friends and family, I definitely want to be in front of them, but I want to earn their business, right? I want to show them exactly how I'm going to do it. I think you hit on a really good point that I cannot stress enough. If you have the flexibility, and one of the things that has definitely moved the needle for getting buyers offers accepted is leaseback periods. You have to think and put yourself in their shoes. That, look, you may have to bear a month or two of paying for rent while, let's say assume they're renting a house, right? Because they haven't found anything and they're scrambling for something. They get under contract. You have to understand a month or two of just eating the cost of a mortgage and a rent payment, where they are allowed to go see and do the same thing you are doing, right? They have a non-contingent offer now instead of a contingent, because oh man, is it hard to get a contingent offer accepted right now. This is important for buyers and sellers. You have to negotiate a leaseback period almost essentially if you're trying to move into another house, and you don't already have something locked down, or you aren't building new construction, right? I mean, I guess that would be your other alternative, but leasebacks are huge. And if you go into the market with that mentality that, hey, we are willing to do what it takes to make this as easy as possible for your sellers, hands down, that will move the needle. And of course, obviously, whatever puts more money in their pocket, nobody's going to be upset about that. So those are the two biggest things that please work with your real estate professional on. I know there's always a little pushback when it comes to the buyers, that we sound like we're siding with the sellers. No, we're just siding with you to make sure that your offer gets accepted, because right now that is by far the most important thing for us.
It's like getting a lottery ticket. It's like
winning. It is. It is. I will tell you that right now. I know, what was it? We just went up on a house and we almost it was so frustrating. We just went up on a house that was on the market for 48 hours down in St. John's, which right now is a bloodbath too. I know Shauna, shout out Shauna, brought it to my attention. I didn't realize it too, but in 32259, which is probably our most competitive zip code here in Northeast Florida, we had 33 single family homes out of 17,000 homes in the, I mean, that alone should show you how competitive it is. And on one of these, I mean, it wasn't a great house. It wasn't run down, had 43 offers we were going up against in 48 hours. We went up 70,000 over asking. We were waiving up to, $25K in appraisal, and we're offering lease back and everything like that. We still lost because we ended up finding out that they were covering closing costs on their side. And so it is just that little bit of money. And you just have to put your best foot forward, because a lot of these listing agents we're not supposed to tell you what's going on the other side. You just have to put your best foot forward. So I can't recommend that enough. I know it sounds like you're overpaying, but in a year, with inflation going like it is, with supply going like it is, you're going to look like a genius.
I mean, the question is, what's the opportunity cost getting your rent raised another couple $100s a month versus locking in today's low interest rate and risking it with what the Fed's going to do for the rest of the year? So, I mean, so we talked about, where the market is. We've got extremely limited supply. We've got a high demand. We talked about interviewing the right agent, making sure that they're looking for off-market stuff. They're very specific for you. And then, what terms are reasonable in today's market for you to actually win. So with all of that being said, Bryson, you have anything else you want to share on the market forecast for 2022?
No, I think we'll just talk about it ad nauseum. I can't really highlight all of those points enough, that you got to bite the bullet. You have to accept the terms. I know Believe me, I know trust in realtors is always low. I remember when I first started out in real estate, they said on a trust scale, we rank somewhere between a lawyer and a used car salesman. I get it. Like, I know this sounds super salesy from me, but I'm just desperate to get you into a home because I know what it will mean for you and your family. And I know if you are relocating here for work or leisure, we have a lot of remote workers coming in here, just because of our environment. We have it's lovely weather. I love some Florida climate. Our winters are very mild. We have the beach so close to us. Jacksonville is definitely on the up. It's a great place to be. So I know a lot of people, this is a huge life changing move for them. Do what it takes to get the house now, because we don't see any end in sight. So I will talk about it ad nauseum if I continue going on a rant. There's nothing more to say. I think we've said it all.
I mean, the only thing that I can say is that I'm a real estate investor and I'm still purchasing homes at the fastest rate ever because of inflation, because of low interest rates. There's so many things you can do with a home now. You can Airbnb it, you can long-term rental it, you can flip it to another buyer who wants to buy it. I mean, there's so many exits that you can have with it. So for me, being in Florida, being in Jacksonville specifically, Jacksonville still being $200,000 less than Orlando and Tampa for the exact same product. People want to be here, and it's still relatively affordable versus these other cities. Like Bryson said, we've got the beaches, we've got tax benefits, we've got rapid growth that's coming to this marketplace. So for me as an investor, I'm still putting my money where my mouth is, and I believe in this market because at the end of the day, if supply, prices will keep going up until supply comes. It's just how it is. And we don't see any reason why supply would overcome demand anytime soon. We could see demand kind of shrug off a little bit, but it's not going to be enough to keep it from prices from continuing to move up.
Yeah. And, in the grand scheme of things too, if you are waiting for a market slowdown, and I'll end with this remark, if you are waiting for a market slowdown, or even, crazier is, I know 2008, 2007, still fresh on the minds of people, but you have to understand that market conditions are so much different. If you are waiting for that, you're going to get burned. And if we do see any sort of price slow, it's just going to slow down a little bit. You're talking about a parabolic rise right now. You're just talking about more of a linear progression, right? It is still going to increase. Real estate is the best place to put your money to hedge against inflation, which we are seeing rapid inflation right now, with all the factors we talked about earlier. All you're going to see is that if you are waiting on the sidelines and you have the money, you're going to see the purchasing power of your dollar go down, and you're going to see homes continue to rise. So it can only rise so much. Yeah, sure. It's going to continue to rise though, regardless. I promise you.
Well, there's other cities where the numbers on paper don't make sense, like in California, New York. I mean, there's these major cities where the rent numbers don't make sense versus the purchase price. So in that's sustainable long term. So even with the wages not keeping up, we've just seen that be the case. So why couldn't that be a Jacksonville situation? And again, to just reiterate, like, we're still relatively more affordable than these other options in Florida, and we're a beach town. So I think this will just continue to move forward regardless of what happens. Say the US hits a recession or something like that, I don't think that's going to change the dynamics very much for our local supply of homes at all. I think the people that are buying here are planning to stay here until they die, and it could be a very long time. People are living longer. And so I think they're just going to stay put and they're going to enjoy it. So I don't see there being a lot of supply coming to the market anytime soon.
No,
So
it's not.
With that, I mean, I would just close it with get in touch with a top agent. If you're calling Momentum Realty, you're getting in touch with a top agent who's responsive, that has what it takes to get you into this market. Call Bryson. The customers love him. You can't get enough 5-star reviews for Bryson. Every single time I turn around, I see another 5-star review. So Bryson, thanks for sharing everything with us today.
Always happy to be here, John. Always.